The kitchen light was too bright for what Carol was about to say. Daniel would remember that detail long after he'd forgotten the exact words. The hum of the refrigerator, the overhead bulb throwing everything into a flat, clinical white. "I need you to not touch me for a while," Carol said. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the dish towel in her hands, folding it in thirds like it mattered. "Okay," Daniel said, because he didn't know what else to say. "I mean it, Daniel. No touching, no hugging, nothing." She finally looked up. Her eyes were dry, which somehow made it worse. "I can't feel anything right now, and when you touch me, I have to pretend I do. I'm tired of pretending." He thought about her mother's funeral 8 months back. He thought about the appointment neither of them talked about anymore, the one that had ended with Carol silent in the passenger seat for the entire drive home. He thought about all the nights since when he'd reached for her in the dark and found her already turned away, already asleep, or pretending to be. "For how long?" he asked. "I don't know." She set the towel down. "Until I feel like myself again." He wanted to argue. He wanted to say that touch was how he knew how to love her, that taking it away felt like she was asking him to stop being her husband and start being her roommate. But her face had the flat, sealed look she got when she'd already decided something, and Daniel had learned 22 years ago that arguing with that face only made it worse. "Okay," he said again. It was the only word he seemed to have left. Renee arrived on a Tuesday, 3 suitcases and a cat carrier, apologizing before she was even through the door. "I swear it's temporary," she said. 2 months, tops, until I find a place." "Stay as long as you need," Carol told her, and hugged her sister tight, the way Daniel hadn't been hugged in 11 days. He counted. He hated that he counted. Renee was younger than Carol by 5 years, and where Carol had gone quiet and careful over the last year, Renee still moved through the world like she expected good things from it, even after her own marriage had ended badly. She hauled her suitcases up to the guest room herself, waving off Daniel's offer to help. "I've been doing everything myself for a year," she said, laughing a little. "I've got a system." That night at dinner, she asked Daniel about his work. Really asked, waited for the actual answer instead of already thinking about something else. It had been a long time since anyone had done that. Carol ate quietly across the table, present but somewhere else, the way she'd been for months. Daniel caught himself watching Renee talk with her hands, animated, alive, and had to look down at his plate. "She's your wife's sister," he told himself. "That's all this is. Family." The no-touching thing was harder than he'd expected. Not the big absences. The sex, obviously gone, but the small ones. The hand on the small of her back guiding her through a doorway. The thumb wiping something off her cheek. The 3 seconds of contact when he handed her a coffee mug. Their fingers used to overlap for just a moment, and now Carol angled her hand to avoid it, every single time. He hadn't realized how much of a marriage was made of those 3-second moments until they were all gone. 2 weeks in, he was standing at the sink washing dishes when Renee came up beside him, drying, the two of them falling into an easy rhythm neither had planned. Their elbows bumped. She laughed. "Sorry," she said. "It's fine," Daniel said. And it was. It was more than fine. It was the first casual, unthinking physical contact he'd had with another human being in over 2 weeks, and something in his chest loosened at it like a held breath finally let go. He didn't like how much he noticed that. Carol started going to bed early, 9 o'clock, sometimes 8:30, claiming exhaustion that Daniel didn't fully believe, but had no right to question. Not with the rule standing between them, like a fence he'd agreed to build himself. which left the evenings, the long, quiet Ohio evenings, cicadas going in the yard, to Daniel and Renee, alone on the back porch with 2 beers, and the kind of conversation that circled without ever quite landing anywhere. Carol used to stay up late, Renee said one night, looking out at the dark yard. When we were kids, I mean. She'd sneak into my room and we'd talk till 2 in the morning about nothing. She was the loud one, you know. People don't believe that now. I believe it, Daniel said. I met her when she was still that person. What happened? He didn't answer right away. The cicadas filled the silence for him. Life happened, I guess, he finally said. Her mom. He stopped himself before he said miscarriage. Some old instinct, keeping it locked behind his teeth even now. Some hard years. Renee looked at him for a long moment, and he felt it. The specific weight of being seen, fully, the way he hadn't been seen in longer than he wanted to admit. You look tired too, Daniel, she said quietly. Not just sleep-tired. He should have laughed it off. Should have said something easy, deflecting, the way he deflected everything these days. Instead, he said, yeah, just that. Just the truth, sitting bare between them in the dark. Renee didn't say anything else. She reached over and set her hand on his forearm. Briefly, lightly, the kind of touch a sister-in-law gives without thinking twice. Daniel felt it travel up his arm like something lit. He didn't move his arm away. He told himself it was because moving it away would have made it into something. He told himself a lot of things that summer that weren't quite true. Above them, a light clicked off in the upstairs window. Carol's window. The bedroom Daniel wasn't allowed to touch her in anymore. He didn't notice it go dark. He was still looking at Renee's hand on his arm, and the question forming underneath his ribs that he wasn't ready to answer yet. What exactly am I doing out here? By the 3rd week, the house had reorganized itself around a shape nobody had planned. Carol kept to the mornings and the early nights, moving through the kitchen like someone conserving energy for a task she hadn't named yet. Daniel and Renee kept the in-between hours, the long afternoons when Carol was at her sister's old job, doing freelance bookkeeping from the dining room table, headphones on, and the evenings after Carol had gone up to bed. Nobody had decided this. It had just happened, the way water finds the low ground. You're a good cook, Renee said one evening, leaning against the counter while Daniel worked through a recipe Carol used to make and hadn't made in months. Carol never mentioned that. Carol doesn't really mention me these days, Daniel said, and then winced at how it came out, more honest, more bitter than he'd meant to let show. Renee didn't flinch from it. She's not doing great, Daniel. I know you know that. I'm not taking sides. I know. He stirred the sauce longer than it needed. I'm not asking you to. But you look like a man nobody's checked on in a long time, Renee said, and I noticed that. That's all. He looked up at her then, and something passed between them that he didn't have a name for. Not yet. Not something he was willing to name. Thank you, he said, quiet, for noticing. The dish thing happened 2 days later, and he thought about it more than he wanted to. He was washing, she was drying, same as before, the radio playing low from the counter, some old song Carol used to like. Renee reached past him for a serving bowl at the same moment he turned to hand it to her, and their hands ended up wrapped around the same piece of ceramic, fingers overlapping, warm and unplanned. Neither of them moved for a second longer than the moment required. Sorry, Renee said, the same as the first time, but her voice had less laughter in it now. It's fine, Daniel said again, and it was the same lie it had been the first time, because it wasn't fine. It was the opposite of fine. It was the best his hands had felt in months, and that fact alone should have scared him more than it did. He let go of the bowl first, made himself do it, turned back to the sink like the water needed his full attention. "Daniel." He didn't turn around. "Yeah." "Nothing." A pause. He heard her set the bowl down, heard the towel go still in her hands. Never mind. He wanted to ask what she'd almost said. He didn't ask. Some part of him understood that asking was its own kind of answer, and he wasn't ready to give one. That night, lying next to Carol, a foot and a half of mattress between them that felt like a county line, he stared at the ceiling and tried to locate the exact moment things had started tilting. Carol's rule had been about her own numbness, her own grief she couldn't hand him any piece of. He understood that, or told himself he did. But 11 days had turned into 3 weeks, and 3 weeks was starting to feel like the new shape of his life, and in the gap where his marriage used to be, something else was quietly, carefully filling in. He turned his head. Carol was asleep, or close to it, her breathing slow and even, her face turned away from him same as always now. He thought about Renee's hand on his forearm on the porch. He thought about her fingers around the bowl, warm against his. It's nothing, he told himself. She's family. This is what family does. They notice you when your wife can't. He almost believed it. Downstairs, faintly, he heard Renee's light footsteps cross the guest room floor, once, then go still. He lay awake a long time after that, listening to a house that had gone quiet, wondering, not for the last time, what exactly he was letting himself want. Have happened sleep wouldn't come. Daniel lay there until the numbers on the clock stopped meaning anything, then gave up and went downstairs for water he didn't really want. The kitchen light was off, but the porch light was on, spilling a thin old line under the back door. Renee was out there, sitting on the top step in an old t-shirt, knees pulled up, a mug of something steaming beside her, even though it was August. He should have gone back upstairs. He opened the door instead. "Couldn't sleep either?" she said, not turning around. "No." He sat down beside her, leaving a careful gap. "You?" "Never could. In a new place. Takes me months." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "Tea, chamomile. Doesn't work, but it gives me something to do with my hands at 2 in the morning." They sat quiet for a while. The cicadas had gone still for the night. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked twice and stopped. "Can I ask you something?" Renee said finally. "Sure." "Are you happy, Daniel?" He almost laughed. The reflexive kind, the kind meant to close a door before it opened too far. But something about the dark, and the hour, and the way she'd asked it plainly, without cruelty, made the laugh die before it reached his mouth. "That's a hard question at 2 a.m., he said. "I know. That's why I asked it now instead of at dinner." He looked out at the yard, black and shapeless in the dark. "I love my wife," he said. "That's not what I asked." He didn't answer right away. Renee waited, unhurried, the way she seemed to wait for everything, like she'd learned patience the hard way, and wasn't in a rush to unlearn it. "I don't know how to be around her anymore," he finally said. "I keep doing everything right, and none of it lands. It's like loving her through a window. I can see her. I can't reach her. That sounds lonely." "It is." The word came out rougher than he meant it to. "It is lonely, Renee. I didn't say that to anybody until just now." She turned to look at him then, and he made the mistake of looking back. "I see you, Daniel," she said quietly. "I've seen you since I got here. The way you go quiet after she deflects you. The way you try anyway, every single day, even when nothing comes back. Not a lot of men would keep trying that long. What else am I supposed to do?" "Nothing," she said. "I'm not saying do anything different. I'm saying somebody should tell you that it's being seen, that you're not invisible, Because I don't think anyone's told you that in a while. His throat felt tight in a way he didn't want to examine. Thank you, he managed. You don't have to thank me for telling the truth. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the opposite. Full, warm, the kind of silence that used to exist between him and Carol before the grief moved into their house and took up all the air. Renee's eyes were still on him. He didn't look away this time, and neither did she. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. The gap between them on the step hadn't changed. A careful 18 inches, the same distance it had been when he sat down. But it felt smaller now, the way a room feels smaller once you've noticed how close the walls are. I should go up, Daniel said, and didn't move. You should, Renee agreed, and didn't move either. The dog down the road barked again, once, and broke whatever had been building between them, enough that Daniel finally stood, his knees stiff, his heart going harder than the moment should have earned. Good night, Renee. Good night, Daniel. He got as far as the kitchen door before he looked back. She was still watching him, mug forgotten in her hands, something unreadable and a little sad in her face. He went upstairs. He lay back down next to his sleeping wife. He did not sleep for a long time, turning over the question he hadn't let himself answer out loud on the porch. Not are you happy, but the one underneath it, the one he could feel taking shape whether he wanted it to or not. What happens if someone else starts seeing me the way Carol used to? Carol left on a Friday morning, overnight bag by the door. Her aunt's fall on the phone the night before turning into a decision made before Daniel woke up. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, she said, keys in hand. Renee has the guest room key if you need anything from storage. Drive safe, Daniel said. It was what he always said. It was easier than anything else he might have said. He watched her car pull out of the driveway and felt something he didn't want to name. Not relief, not quite, but something standing close enough to it to make him feel ashamed. The day passed normally enough. Renee made lunch. Daniel mowed the back lot in the heat and came in sunburned across the back of his neck. They ate dinner on the porch because the kitchen was stifling, and for a few hours it felt like nothing was different, like this was simply what a house sounded like, with two people in it who liked each other's company. It was after 9 when the ordinary version of the evening started slipping. Renee had found an old photo album in the hall closet. Carol's, from before Daniel. Snapshots of two sisters at a lake house somewhere in Michigan, gap-toothed and sunburned, and laughing at something the camera hadn't caught. God, look at her, Renee said, tilting the album so Daniel could see. She used to laugh with her whole face. I miss that. Me too, Daniel said, and meant it more than he expected to. Their shoulders were close on the couch, not touching, but close enough that he was aware of the exact half-inch of space left between them. Renee turned another page. Her hair had come loose from its clip sometime during dinner, and a piece of it fell forward as she leaned in to look closer at a photo. And without deciding to, Daniel reached over and tucked it back behind her ear. He felt her go still. He went still, too, his hand not quite gone from beside her face, close enough to feel the warmth of her skin without touching it. Daniel, she said, very quietly. Not a warning. Not quite an invitation either. Just his name, holding something. I know, he said, though he didn't. Not really. Didn't know what he was agreeing to. Didn't know what I know was supposed to mean. The album slid off her lap, forgotten. Neither of them reached for it. She looked at him. Really looked. The way she'd looked at him on the porch step. Except there was no 18 inches between them now, no dog barking down the road to break it. Just the lamplight and the hush of the house, and two people who had spent 3 weeks quietly, carefully finding their way to exactly this moment. We shouldn't, she said. No, he agreed. Neither of them moved away. His hand found the side of her face, gentle, like he was asking a question with it. She didn't pull back. Her breath caught. He heard it, felt it almost, the small sound of her holding still. The space between them closed slowly, inch by inch, neither of them rushing it, both of them aware, painfully aware, of every second that could still be the one where they stopped. Neither of them stopped. The kiss was brief, careful. It carried more weight than its length should have allowed. Everything unsaid on that porch step, everything held back for 3 weeks, folded into a few seconds that changed the shape of the room they were sitting in. Then it ended, and the weight of it landed on Daniel like something physical. He pulled back first. His hands were shaking. He hadn't noticed until he looked down at them. "I have to," he started, and didn't finish. He stood up fast, the album sliding the rest of the way to the floor, and walked into the kitchen because he needed somewhere else to be, needed distance from what his body still remembered. He stood at the sink in the dark, both hands braced against the counter edge, staring at nothing. What did I just do? The thought arrived flat and enormous, too big to feel all at once. He thought of Carol's face on the day she'd said no touching, hurt, sealed, asking for space to grieve, not permission for this. He thought of the county line down the middle of their bed. He thought of 22 years and a wedding in her mother's backyard, and every ordinary Tuesday since. He heard Renee's footsteps behind him, hesitant, stopping a few feet away. "Daniel, don't," he said, not turning around. "Just don't. I need a minute." She didn't argue. He heard her go, heard the stairs, heard the guest room door close softly. He stood alone in the dark kitchen for a long time, the taste of the kiss still there, guilt rising in him like water finding its level. But underneath the guilt, quieter, more frightening, something else was there too. He didn't want to look directly at what that something else was. He stayed at the sink until the sky outside started going gray at the edges, and he still hadn't gone back to bed. He told himself the next morning that it was over. A mistake, born of loneliness and a bad night. The kind of thing that happened once and was carried quietly to the grave, never spoken of, never repeated. He believed that for almost 18 hours. Renee kept her distance through breakfast, moving around him with a careful politeness that hurt more than anger would have. Neither of them mentioned the album still lying on the living room floor, where it had fallen. Daniel picked it up around noon and put it back on the shelf, squaring its edges like precision could undo something. Carol texted around 2. "Aunt Ruth's ankle isn't broken, just sprained. Staying one more night to help her settle. Home tomorrow." Daniel read it 3 times. Relief and dread arrived together, tangled, indistinguishable. By evening, the house had gone quiet in a different way than before. Not comfortable, not easy, but charged, like the air before weather changes. Daniel sat on the porch alone, and it was almost 10 when the screen door opened behind him, and Renee came out and sat down, closer than the careful 18 inches this time. "I keep telling myself I'm going to apologize," she said, "and then I remember I'm not sorry, and that scares me more than anything." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't trust what would come out if he opened his mouth. "I know what this is," Renee went on, quiet, steady. "I know what it makes me. I've spent all day telling myself to pack a bag and go stay with a friend until I find my own place. I haven't done it. Why not?" His voice came out rough. "Because I don't want to," she said simply. "And because I think you don't want me to either." He looked at her, and every argument he'd built through the long gray morning, the 22 years, Carol's face, the wedding in her mother's backyard, was still there, still true, still standing. It just wasn't enough anymore to stop what was already moving. "I'm not a good man right now," he said. "No," Renee agreed. Neither am I a good sister. I think we both already know that." He reached for her hand in the dark, and she let him take it, and something in his chest that had been clenched for a year, maybe longer, finally, terribly, let go. What followed over the next hours wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, deliberate, the two of them moving through the house like people who'd already decided and were only now catching up to the decision. It carried the weight of everything neither of them said out loud. 22 years being broken in careful, silent pieces. Guilt sitting right alongside wanting, refusing to cancel each other out the way Daniel had hoped they might. Afterward, lying in the dark of the guest room, Daniel stared at a ceiling that wasn't his and felt the full size of what he'd done arrive all at once, no longer abstract, no longer something he could talk himself out of at the sink at 3 a.m. "I love Carol," he said into the dark. "I know," Renee said. She didn't sound hurt by it. She sounded like she'd been expecting it. "I love her too. That's the part I can't make sense of." Neither of them had an answer for that. They lay there a while longer, not touching now. The closeness of an hour ago already curdling into something heavier. Daniel finally rose before dawn and went back to his own bed, alone, staring at the ceiling until the room went from black to gray to the pale gold of an ordinary Sunday morning. A morning that was supposed to be ordinary, that had no business feeling like the last one of its kind. He was in the kitchen making coffee, hands unsteady, rehearsing nothing because there was nothing to rehearse, when he heard tires on the gravel driveway. A full day early. He looked out the window and saw Carol's car pulling in, her silhouette behind the wheel, home sooner than anyone had told her to be. The coffee pot kept dripping behind him. He didn't move to stop it. Carol came in through the side door with her overnight bag over one shoulder, already talking before she'd fully crossed the threshold. "Ruth's fine, just fussing. You know how she gets." She stopped mid-sentence, set the bag down slower than she'd picked it up. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Daniel said, too fast. "Long night. Didn't sleep much." Carol looked at him a beat longer than the answer required. She didn't say anything else, but something had already caught. He could see it land behind her eyes, the way she used to notice things before the last hard year had taught her to stop looking too closely at anything. Renee came downstairs 20 minutes later, showered, dressed, her face arranged into something careful and ordinary. She hugged her sister, asked about Aunt Ruth, moved through the kitchen making toast she didn't eat. Carol watched her too. Nothing happened that first day. Nothing happened the second either. Just small things, the kind of things that mean nothing on their own, and everything stacked together. Renee stopped meeting Carol's eyes at dinner. Daniel found reasons to be in a different room than either of them. The porch, once the warmest place in the house, sat empty every night that week. On the 4th day, Carol found the earring. It was Renee's, small, gold, the kind that could fall out during an ordinary conversation on an ordinary couch, and it turned up wedged between the couch cushions in the living room, in a spot that made no sense for a woman who'd been sleeping in the guest room the whole time she'd lived there. Carol held it out on her palm at dinner, not accusing, just asking. "This is yours, right?" Renee's face did something small and involuntary before she caught it. "Must have fallen off. I sit there sometimes." "Sure," Carol said. Her voice was even. Too even. Daniel kept his eyes on his plate. It came apart 4 days later, in the kitchen. In the flat white light Daniel would always associate with the worst conversations of his marriage. "I need you to tell me the truth," Carol said. She wasn't crying. That was somehow worse than if she had been. Whatever it is, I need you to just say it." Daniel opened his mouth, and nothing came for a long moment, and that silence was its own confession. "Daniel, I'm sorry," he said. It was the only place he knew how to start. Carol's face went through something complicated. Shock arriving late, like it had been waiting politely for permission. With Renee, not a question. She already knew. She just needed him to be the one who said it. "Yes," he said. The kitchen went very quiet. Somewhere upstairs, a door, the guest room door, opened and then didn't close, like Renee had heard enough through the floor to know she didn't need to come down and confirm it. "I asked you for space," Carol said, and her voice cracked on the last word, the evenness finally giving way. "I asked you not to touch me because I couldn't feel anything. And you—" She stopped, started again. "You couldn't have found literally anyone else. It's not about anyone else," Daniel said, hearing how useless it sounded even as he said it. "It's not about finding someone." "Don't," Carol said. "Don't you dare try to make this into something that happened to you." He had nothing to say to that, because she was right, and they both knew it. Renee appeared in the doorway then, a bag already packed over her shoulder. She must have started the moment she heard Carol's voice break. She didn't try to explain. There was nothing left that explaining would fix. "I'll stay with Denise tonight," she said to Carol, not looking at Daniel at all. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't undo anything. I'm sorry anyway." Carol didn't answer her. She stood very still at the counter, both hands braced against the edge of it, in almost exactly the position Daniel had stood in 5 nights earlier, staring at nothing, trying to absorb something too large to take in all at once. Renee left through the front door. Her car started in the driveway, idled a moment too long, then pulled away. The house went silent in a way it hadn't been silent in weeks. Carol finally looked up at Daniel, and her eyes were dry again. That same flat, sealed look from the night she'd first laid down her rule. Except now, Daniel understood, with a sick, sinking certainty, exactly what that look had always been protecting her from. "Get out of the kitchen," she said quietly. "I can't look at you right now." He went. He slept in the guest room that night, in the same bed, on sheets that hadn't been changed. He didn't sleep. He lay there listening to the house and understood, for the first time in a long time, exactly how much silence a home could hold. Carol didn't ask him to leave the next morning. She also didn't speak to him beyond what was necessary. Coffee made in silence, a shared kitchen, navigated like 2 strangers, assigned to the same small space. 3 days passed that way. Daniel didn't try to fill the silence with apologies. He'd said sorry once in the kitchen, and it had meant nothing said against what he'd done. He understood now that it would take more than a word to mean anything at all. Renee didn't come back. She texted Carol once, a message Carol didn't show him, and he didn't ask about. He assumed, from the careful way Carol's face closed whenever the subject came near, that some of it was forgiveness, and most of it wasn't, and that the sisters would carry the shape of this for a long time, in a place separate from him entirely. On the 5th night, Carol was in the kitchen when he came downstairs for water, and instead of leaving, she stayed. "I keep trying to understand why," she said, not looking at him. "Not to forgive it. I don't know if I'll ever get there. I just want to understand it." Daniel sat down across from her, carefully, like the chair itself might refuse him. "I was lonely," he said. "That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse, but it's the truth, and you asked for the truth. I was lonely too," Carol said. "I've been lonely inside my own grief for a year, and I didn't let you in, and I know that's mine to own. But I never," her voice caught, She pressed her lips together until it steadied. I never once looked for somewhere else to put it. I know, Daniel said. I don't have anything that makes this smaller than it is. They sat in the quiet a while, the refrigerator humming the same as it had the night she'd first said the words, no touching. Daniel thought about how much had happened in the strange, narrow space of that one rule. How a boundary meant to protect something had ended up exposing exactly how little was left to protect. I don't know what happens now, Carol finally said. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I genuinely don't know. I don't know if I can stay in this house with you tonight, and I don't know if I can leave it either. I'm not going to tell you what to feel, Daniel said. I don't have that right anymore. Something in her face shifted at that. Not softening, not exactly, but registering that he'd said the one true thing available to him. I loved you enough to ask for space, Carol said quietly. I don't know yet if I love you enough to ask for anything else, but I'm still sitting here. That has to mean something, even if I don't know what. It does, Daniel said. It's more than I deserve tonight. She didn't reach for his hand. He didn't reach for hers. The distance between them across the kitchen table wasn't the county line it had been in bed for weeks. It was something rawer, more honest, unmeasured yet. Outside, the cicadas had gone quiet for the season, the first cool edge of autumn finally cutting through the long, heavy summer that had undone them. Carol stood, finally, and paused at the doorway. Good night, Daniel, she said. Not warm, not cold either. Just true. The first true thing either of them had managed to say to each other in longer than either wanted to admit. He sat alone at the table long after she'd gone upstairs, understanding at last that some things broken in a marriage don't announce whether they can be mended. They simply ask you to stay in the room and find out.